the disclaimers in the chat in case you don't have it for yourself.
Thank you. I do not have it. Let's see. Where can I? Where is my chat? Oh, weird. I don't see it anywhere.
You have a bar on the top that says people, reactions, chat, camera, your mic, somewhere up there.
You want me to read it real quick, Bree?
Yeah, that'd be great. That's so weird.
This meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, the chat isn't popping up on my little bar thing. Cool. So we have a pretty slim agenda, so it'll be pretty ad hoc-y, and if people want to bring up other things, that'd be awesome. I know Phil and Dan from the full meeting that I missed had some topics to go over. Chris, do you want to start off on that?
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, it's a pretty informal day, I think, just kind of a couple issues that have arisen recently. So for both of these, I think I can set a little bit of context, but mostly kind of looking to see where the group wants to take this. And if I did a little bit of research on the funding side, don't claim to be an expert for the second agenda, but hopefully enough to kind of get us started there, and we can dig in further meetings if desired. But I'll just kick it off with the bike parking. So for context, I think we talked about this at the last full, not the last executive committee. I think it was the last full committee. Dan had reached out about some bike parking around downtown, around City Hall. So we had discussions about that and kind of figuring out what was going in there and what would be happening with those. I still am not quite sure what's going to be, what the design of the bike racks are for the 4th Street. Like I said last time, there are more going in, but I'll get that information to everybody once I have it. But in general, just kind of thought it would be a good time to bring up bike parking more generally again. And so I've got the strategy from the Transportation Action Plan up on my screen. I was just going to kind of go through some of the bullets for that. If you want to go to go.minneapolismn.gov and then to the bike section, it's strategy number 9, which is update bicycle and micromobility parking practices to support demand and diversity of vehicles to significantly expand bicycle racks in the right of way. So there are a number of, there are 6 different actions under this, of which 1, 2, 3.
Chris, could you share your screen, please?
I can't actually, because we didn't put this on. So I'm just gonna kind of like hit the highlights
Gotcha.
for context. But if you want to pull it up on your own screen, you're welcome to do so. But so 5 of the 6 strategies are for the 0 to 3 year. So this is something that we've said we would do in the immediate term. I believe we're technically in the middle of year 2 of that. I believe so. And so that involves like developing an approach to on-street bikes, incorporating bike parking in all of our reconstruction projects, which previously has not been something. That's been something that the BAC advocated for quite a bit, installing with where's that one? Updating the zoning code, which has to do with developments, and I think maybe a little bit more of what you were talking about, Dan, related to like even the new office building. You know, the public bike street parking is decided based on what's in ordinance of like number of occupants in a building means X number of public uncovered bike parking, things like that. So that's something that we've said we would tackle, and then also working with Metro Transit to on bike parking at transit stations. So I guess the main point is that we've said we would do a lot of work around bike parking in the first 3 years of this. I wouldn't say that any of these are complete yet. So there's still work to be done there. There's definitely ongoing work in these areas, but yeah, I think I'll maybe pass it to Dan also, since he kind of was the impetus for this. Or before I do that, Bree, I see you've got your hand up. Or is that from earlier? Okay.
That was from earlier, but I always
Gotcha.
find it interesting in the TAP that it's connected to the bike share with bike parking a lot of the time. And I did just see that the contract went out to Lyft, at least on my socials.
Yeah, I think there was just a news release, and I'm not exactly sure what they said in that, but I know that a news release went out about some of those contracts with the sharing companies. So yeah, Dan, I don't know if you want to kind of.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting to pull this up in the TAP and look at when this is going on. So maybe there's a way we can connect this with some of the things I was concerned about or brought to the attention of the both Chris and Jordan, and then we talked a little bit about it at the full BAC, and there were two issues that came up. One being that apparently Hennepin County clears all of the bike racks that are movable from basically the light rail area and their plaza for winter cleaning, and they're just to make snow maintenance easier. At least that's the assumption. It could have had something to do with the trials that had been downtown. But anyways, a gentleman wrote, I think Chris and myself, or maybe it was me and then I wrote Chris, about that he couldn't find any parking downtown. And I thought that was interesting, and partly because I haven't looked for parking in 2 years downtown. And I got downtown, must have been 2 weeks ago, and rode around City Hall and the new public government, whatever it's public service center, and around the Hennepin courtyard. And by goodness, I was kind of surprised to see what I had found. All the parking that had been along 4th Street in front of City Hall had been eliminated with the 4th Street reconstruction. And there was some parking, new parking put on one corner, and I think they're going to put it on the other corner as well. But the net effect is a real loss of what was there before, and just, again, less protected and not as secure parking for people that are looking for a secure place to park. Didn't find anything at Hennepin County except underneath the covered area, which goes underneath one of the streets there, and that's that kind of old loop wave type of parking that you know, it's very hard to kind of get a lot of bikes on it, because you want it, if you're going to park safely, it's lots of times you park across it rather than how I think you're supposed to use it. And then when I went over to the public service center, there was a small amount of new bike parking in front of the center, where you would really like to see bike parking because it's an active area and people are coming and going, and so you would feel better about if somebody was going to thieve a bike there, they'd have to be worried about people watching. And found more parking on, is it 4th and 5th, no, 5th and 6th streets, and I looked at it, and it's done in a way that it's very close to the curb. And I didn't go out and measure, but I certainly felt like, man, if I was going to try to park on the street side of that of those stands, I would be in the traffic lane. And so it was just a very upsetting day. And I think Chris and Jordan have explored, yes, we're going to get these things out, and it's coordination between both the city, well, it's between the MBC, the Municipal Building Commission, that is dealing with the city, with the city hall. You've got whomever is the project coordinator for the new public service center to do those racks to go out, and then you've got Hennepin County to do it. So you've got all three of these with us opening up Minneapolis, and I dare say I think it's going to take we're going to be opening up without bike racks, or without optimal bike racks. So that was, I called that to everybody's attention and said, geez, we should watch this or figure out how to stay on top of it. And I'll just finish up that we also had a very interesting presentation at the engineering meeting regarding is it the E line? It's the BRT that's going down Lake Street. And I might be wrong. It may not be the E line. Maybe maybe it's the B line. I'm not sure. But
This is Natalie. I think it is the B line.
B line. Thank you, Natalie. And it was pretty much a metro presentation on that, with Hennepin County talking about how they would be going to 4 to 3 lanes in part of this and adding a dedicated bus lane. But there was not much in it for biking. And having been to Lake Street in certain parts, you will find a bike corral or in front of the brewery at Midtown. But other than that, it's kind of like whether a business has put something up by itself, or for the most part, I found a parking meter or a street pole, and it seemed like a perfect time if we're going to open up this street again. And the way that the street is configured, parking pretty much will remain as it is, and it seems like a perfect time to ask the city to investigate whether they could get some bike corrals there without requiring the individual businesses to pull permits or to go through the process of applying for these things, but just for the city to take it on. And we wrote that in our resolution for that. So yeah, so I think it's just great to have a conversation about this and to try to decide, do we wait and see what happens in these areas? How can we support Lake Street and Hennepin County putting in the changes that they're planning, which at this moment we haven't had a whole lot of discussion about anything other than the lanes and the bus line going in. And there you go.
Bill?
Yeah, so as you were talking, Dan, I was just thinking back to, we had a presentation from Metro Transit about their BRT standard equipment that would be installed with a stop. And as that's one of the strategies, 9.6, under this bike parking transportation action plan goal, I don't think it was covered parking. My recollection is that it was standalone out in the open U-shaped block. So that was one thing that sort of jumped to mind. And then thinking about Lake Street, just walking down the other day, and there are bike racks, but they're not every block. They're in the public right of way. They were put in when the East Lake Street was redone. So then that makes me, and then looking at strategy 9.2, it's like, do we have a map? Does the city GIS system, can we filter out a layer and take a look at that? And would that include private installations? And then the third sort of thing that jumped to mind was, I know after the 2040 resolution, was passed the city council, the zoning code, different zoning district rules were going to be updated. Were they updated to look at bike parking? I guess I don't know, because I don't think the whole zoning code has been thoroughly overhauled to conform with 2040 direction. That's no.
I don't know for sure, but I don't recall seeing any updates to the specific bike parking numbers that are required by ordinance. And I feel like that probably would have come through our group for review, and I probably would have been one of the people that have eyes on it in Matthew's absence, but not necessarily. So it still could have happened, but I don't think so.
I'm assuming not. Yeah. As far as Metro Transit, I mean, I know we're going to talk to them again. 9.6 talks about covered parking. Yeah, I don't think they were talking about covered parking in their standard installation. So maybe that's something to deal with. And then the city GIS. Do you have a sense, Chris, whether there's a layer with bike parking citywide?
Yeah, I haven't worked with it. There are some, I think so. What we do know, I'm pretty sure, is where there are hitches on like vehicle parking, like the signposts for vehicle parking, where there's paid vehicle parking downtown. I think all of those are logged. I'm not sure. I don't know that we have a comprehensive file with all like bike parking in the right of way across the city. I'm not sure. We may have it for downtown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, this is just another one of these issues where don't we really need like a full-time person to? I mean, it's a huge issue. It's a great issue. I think the TAP really has the right support strategies identified, but of course, wow, each one of these requires a bit of work to implement.
Yeah, bike parking is always an issue since it's an afterthought on everything, unfortunately. Yeah, I think we just keep on pushing for it, and yeah, it's a weird thing. Never forget about car parking.
Oh, do we talk about that?
Yeah, so
the we.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, do you have any suggestions on how to move this forward?
I mean, if you all had interest in kind of highlighting bike parking as like an important thing in the TAP that you'd like to see work on, that could be something. I think, like when Dan was talking specifically before the meeting, tying it to specific projects is a pretty tangible way of doing it for like the big projects and things like that. But obviously that's sort of a piecemeal approach, whereas the TAP outlines a more like a broader strategy. So yeah, if there was a desire to kind of raise that up as something you're all focused on, that could be an option.
I like that idea. And I think it is a priority. It seems to be coming up over and over again. Cool. Any other comments about bike parking, folks? Oh, Dan. Oh no, Natalie first, please.
Hi. I just want to say, yes, I agree. It would be really awesome if this could be more of a focus. Bike parking seems like something that is a lost priority sometimes. So thank you so much for making space for it.
Dan?
There you go. Yeah, I think that 9.6 and covered parking, I'm guessing, who knows what covered parking is, but I'm guessing it's kind of like the locked boxes that sort of have gone out of style. I mean, you just don't see them that much more. And I know the BRTs that have been going in sort of the, kind of the combo of things that go with wayfinding and stuff. They've just had bike racks that you lock a bike to. So that maybe something, it's something to ask about, but it may be something that has been veered away from, rather than having a place that you would lock up a bike inside of a canister, and then it would be not usable by anybody else until you got back to it. Might be a reason why they've gone away from it. I mean, a locker like that could be used for a lot of different things besides a bike. But I would be willing to try to massage something together if anybody else is interested. I was going to say that one possibility that, Chris, you might be able to explore a little bit, and I'm not sure if we should wait for this, but I'll just say it, and that is that a bike, basically a survey of bike parking along Lake Street was brought up during the public hearing, and there were city officials there that said that that had not happened to their knowledge. So that would be one place to, perhaps, Chris, you could explore, and I could talk a little bit more to you about that, in an email or whatever.
That was specifically for Lake Street, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think it'd probably be best to go through Yasna, if you want me to connect you with Yasna, just because she's the project manager and I'm not involved in that. But
yeah.
I think it's totally appropriate to reach out to her.
Yeah, and this was it was Kathleen Mail that had mentioned that she didn't believe that anything had been done on Lake Street. So if there hasn't, is it worth doing? And like I say, I'm not sure if it's better for us just to write a resolution or if it's something you want to follow up on, but that's where the source came from in the comment. I think Yasma had left the room for a few minutes when that discussion took place. She came back online after that.
Does anyone remember? I feel like I remember Open Streets a few years ago doing kind of an advocacy push with bike parking, and maybe it was businesses. Anyone remember that?
I think some of the, if you look at the biking program, which I just looked at briefly, for the city right now, you've got a bike corral system that is dependent on a business making an application, and it's not really been, it gets removed in the wintertime, and I just haven't seen it used a lot. And but when we brought up the bike corral thing, or when I brought it up at the E-line presentation, I was gearing to permanently take a parking spot, because if there's anything that's shocking about the Lake Street redo, is just the amount of parking that's retained, because it's it's the same. It's going to be the same as it is for basically, and it would be a perfect time to take one or two parking spots, particularly congested areas or areas that have businesses and have the city really just go do this, rather than waiting for a business to try to make an application. And
that's one of the big flaws, I think, of bike parking in the city, even with cost share, which is nice. It's a lot of work for the city and for, well, I guess for the contractors that the city works with. I don't know who it is anymore. To go out and do the measurements and then do the install and order and things like that. Cumbersome, and even I think the feedback is for business. I've talked to small businesses and they're like, you can't advertise that. Like, oh my god. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's such a small amount that I wish the city could just fully subsidize it. Oh my god, I can't say it. But yeah, Phil.
Well, no, I'm thinking that we always, when we're looking at corridor plans, I feel like we're always informed and we see on plan view that, yes, there's going to be bike parking, but I think we've never, I mean, this discussion just, I think at the very least, it reminds all of us that every time we have a project, an engineering plan come before us, the question is not so much, oh, I'm glad there's bike parking, but it should be, does the corridor plan, has it added location of existing bike parking into the city's GIS, because that's of course where it should be. And then number two, can we look at that and make sure that we're providing sufficient bike parking to accommodate larger volumes? So, I mean, that's sort of it seems like the very least we can do, because I think city staff and public works has thought about parking, but not in a systematic, documented way. And so that's something that we can just continue to push project by project at the very least.
Cool. Yeah, Dania, it'd be great if you can work on something, Yasma, and for Lake Street in particular. But yeah, just folks kind of think about ideas that how we can move that forward and make the tap a reality. I know it's hard with like kind of getting county projects and Metro Transit and things like that. Because I mean, I remember Metro Transit talking about a bike kind of center at the light rail at 38th, and I haven't heard anything about that in a really long time. I do know, I just saw on my socials that Hiawatha is being repaved too, so that's gonna be interesting because it looks like nothing much changes except the repaving, which isn't needed, but that's one hellhole of a road. But
So I'd be willing to try to put some stuff together, and kind of what I'm gearing out of this is to try to address this action 9.9, which is supposed to be happening in years 2020 to 2023, and that we're looking at 9.2 and 9.6, and here are a couple of examples of concerns that we've recently seen. Being one is downtown in the downtown corridor, the government corridor, and two, Lake Street, which is getting the B line and we're hoping is going to get rebuilt, and this is a perfect time to focus on this and something to be able to start plotting bike parking on the city's GIS. Something to that effect, and I'd be willing to put a few things together. And Phil, I could send it to you, Bree and Phil, and we can, whomever else is online here that's interested in knowing, I could do that too. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dan, for that.
Yeah, great.
I'm interested.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about bike parking. Let's see. The next thing on the agenda is federal funding. And Chris, you said that you pulled up some information, so thanks for that.
Yeah, let me just get this up here. So yeah, I think it was Phil had brought up just an interest in learning more about funding, and there's new information coming out every day, so it was kind of fun for me to just look through stuff a little bit. And again, I'm just going to kind of talk through stuff because most of this is just resources from a bunch of other different places. And I can send out some links if folks are interested also, but mostly just kind of going to give a somewhat brief high level overview of what the IIJA, which is the infrastructure, I'm already forgetting it. Got it somewhere. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is the new Infrastructure Act, and it has a lot of different implications for a lot of different programs and a lot of different types of funding. Not all of it is specifically the type of funding that would come straight to something like Public Works, Minneapolis Public Works, or even all to the city of Minneapolis or things like that. So it's very broad scale. But I am just going to go, I found a couple things that do a decent job of overview. So in general, so of the $1.2 trillion bill, about half of that, 54% of it total, goes towards surface transportation, and it's a 5-year bill. So you're looking at about a little over $1 billion every year that's going towards surface transportation. And for those of you familiar with federal funding, that used to be the FAST Act. This is kind of the update to that. And so this is a bigger version of what was the FAST Act. The rest of it goes towards things like aviation, ports, broadband, energy, just a variety of other infrastructure things in there. And so the new infrastructure bill, also something that's interesting to note is it does increase highway funding quite a bit, specifically increases highway funding by 90% of what it was before, transit funding by 80% of what it was before, and rail infrastructure funding by 750% of what it was before. So those are kind of 3 major buckets of sorts. And the types of programs that it goes into, so it kind of breaks things down in different ways depending on which websites you look at and things like that. But I was kind of trying to look at specifically like active transportation and complete streets sort of funding, which there's other funding that is more broad, like some highway funding when you reconstruct a highway, like for example, Hiawatha or like Central, like those are urban highways that you would include active transportation things in that. But for the most part, I just kind of focused on the programs that were specific to this. So the Transportation Alternatives Program is something that is a big pot of money. So that's $7.2 billion over the 5 years, and that's the type of thing that you would apply to directly, as opposed to like it coming through the state. I believe that for the TAP, the federal funds, they may still be administered by the state actually, but it's applying to that kind of specific pot of money for things like safe routes to school programs, or really any transportation projects other than driving. There's also a specific active transportation infrastructure investment program that's got $1 billion over the 5-year period, so $200 million each year. And that's communities applying specifically for active transportation funds. Safe Streets and Roads for All is $6 billion, so that's kind of a federal Vision Zero pot of money. And then the local and regional infrastructure project assistance, which used to be RAISE, which is $15 billion, up from $4 billion spent from 2009 to 2020, which I believe, and I haven't confirmed this, but I think that might be pretty directly related to regional solicitation. So I think that gives an idea of how much money could potentially be added for regional solicitation, which is a really big thing for us, you know, going from 4 billion spent over almost 10 years up to 15 billion. And I'll have to check on that because I'm not entirely sure if that's separate or like a piece of that for us. But those were some of the specific programs that I found just related to active transportation. And then maybe just a couple other like high level things I found. So 40 billion of this in total is specifically for bridges. 8 billion is for freight and highway projects for the Rebuilding America infrastructure program. 7.5 billion for Rebuilding American Infrastructure Sustainably. So that's part of the RAISE grants. And then they have something called 5 billion for National Infrastructure Project Assistance, or mega projects, which are applied for on a competitive basis for like multi-jurisdictional or regional projects of significance that may also cut across multiple modes of transportation. So that's just kind of generally some of the stuff that I found. I can send out the most useful link I found. If you look for Transportation for America and search their 2021 infrastructure law, they have this thing where you can say, choose your starting point, take me to the basics or toss me in the deep end. So you can kind of do whatever you want in there. I started with the basics, so don't feel like you need to jump into the deep end right away. But I found that to be useful. And then I guess the other main thing is that like really still what I took away from this, like the main way that we're getting capital dollars is still the regional solicitation outside of the money that we set aside in our personal budget. And we don't have an exact number on how much that's changed, but that's still the big thing. And then there are outside of that, I think the other big pot of money that will affect us, but that isn't directly Minneapolis, is all the money that's going towards public transit in particular. And so that amount of funding rose by 80%. And so when you think about all the BRT lines and other kind of transit improvements that we have in Minneapolis, those are opportunities also, you know, with all the light rail extensions and projects and all BRT projects, we're always looking at ways to improve bike ped and how to leverage that for bike ped improvements as well. So I think that's the other thing that will not directly impact Minneapolis dollars that we receive, but will definitely impact Minneapolis streets quite a bit by increasing those. So yeah, just kind of a high level. If we want to like dig into this deeper over the coming months or anything, and people have specific topics or areas they want to do or want to do their own research, like we can definitely do that, but figured I'd start there and see if that sparks any conversation.
Well, Chris, that's a great overview. I'm just hearing the numbers, the amount of money for these particular programs, and the fact that they're increases from what were existing programs like transportation alternatives is really impressive. You know, one thing, or first maybe an additional thing, is I was reading about the federal government in its budget, including the opportunity for earmarks, and so there were dollar figures for Amy Klobuchar and well, I guess our House members too, right? Yeah, Ilhan, I think, had sort of amount of money that, you know, sort of was there as an earmark for projects coming in, and so it just, like this federal money, it just makes me, it just makes me wonder: are there people we know about or should know about who have been really tracking the money and have projects queued up that we could find out about, to see if we can get bike walk transit added to maybe a project that maybe they weren't really thinking, a bridge project, or a corridor project that maybe they weren't really thinking about bikes. But always the question is, wow, who's sort of more aware? I don't know if it's the Minneapolis lobbyist, or if it's maybe Klobuchar's staff, or I don't know. It's like inquiring minds want to know this much money.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like the state politics and even regional politics are not things I'm super familiar with, and I'm definitely not in those rooms with those decision makers. But I mean, I do think, yeah, there's, when that much money is coming through, there must be conversations that are happening about where and how to put that in our state.
Yeah. Yeah, for example, I'm going to attend an open house for the new Ward 2 City Council member, and then there's a convention this weekend with 3 people running for the House, my House District 63A, and it's like I want to ask both. I will ask both these people. Are they in touch with people who are tracking how this money could be a flow through, because it is sort of federal, state, well, county, regional with Met Council, and then the city. Yeah.
And I will say, like, there are folks on our team who are even more ingrained in that. And like, I'll just throw out one name of, like, Ethan Foley was kind of coordinating the regional solicitation efforts at a higher level, and he's very aware of kind of the state level type stuff. So I don't know how much he's been involved in that, but also other folks are kind of looking at the direct, whether it be grants or regional solicitation increases, and kind of having those conversations and coordinating, and part of it is like trying to implement the plans that are in place, which is why we spend so much time on something like the TAP, to have those projects identified for when the funds come. But Dan, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just tying in with that, the 2022 regional solicitation applications for Minneapolis just went through city council, either city council or a committee. But if you put this down, Google Minneapolis 2022 regional solicitation application, and in Google you'll see a heading that says 202 Met Council regional solicitation applications on limbs. And it's a very, very interesting document, because this is what they're going for this year, and it's $62 million. And on there are, it's a very interesting page that just walks down the different projects and the amounts. But at the bottom of that page, there are also links to, it's a very long thing. There's a link to a map of where these regional solicitations are, as well as fiscal note, which I don't think has much in it right now, but that might be fun for you to take a look at, just for what they're proposing to do. And what will come after this is actually the regional application. In other words, they will write a report about what they're going to do for a specific street. And so this is, it gets into the weeds, but it's kind of interesting, particularly if you have something there that interests you. In fact, like as Bree was mentioning, at Hiawatha Avenue, they have one in here for spot mobility and safety at 26th Avenue East and Hiawatha intersection. That's that awful intersection that is at 26th. And so it's worthwhile, just reviewing it. I think you might find a street that or an intersection that you're interested in, and take a look at. Connected with that, if you do this, you will notice that one of the regional solicitation applications will be for the North Side Greenway Phase 1. And if you type that into Google and just do a search, you'll find North Side Greenway Phase 1, MinneapolisMN.gov. It's light on information, but the important thing on way at the end is a link for an open house on Thursday, April 7th from 5:30 if you're interested in attending. And this is a project that, boy, it goes back over 10 years with involvement in public health and corporations and everybody, and it's a fun one to look at. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, federal funding is always weird, complicated, quid pro quo funding model. So yeah, thanks for walking us through some of that. Any other comments from anyone else?
Maybe just I'll add one other thing that related to funding, but I don't know how directly it's tied to this bill. I've just noticed personally that there's been a lot more dollars allocated towards equity and like planning around equity and transportation justice and like formal grants with a good amount of money to be able to do like local community planning. And we've benefited from some of that. Those are actually the root of the money we got is Bloomberg philanthropies through the American Cities Climate Challenge. But there's other federal programs and things. So just wanted to throw that in as a funding thing, that a trend that I've noticed that seems to be good. And yeah, we've been benefiting from that as well. I think Yasna's applied for some other federal kind of equity project related funds too. So not huge capital dollars necessarily for those, but important planning dollars.
Yeah, Chris, how is the equity planning thingamabobber?
Yeah, the racial equity framework. I think I should talk to Kathleen, who's like the actual formal lead on that. But I think like in the next month or two, we're gearing up to start. I'll just give kind of an informal update to start what we're calling a community equity work group. So we've been working with the Cultural Wellness Center, Anthony Taylor, who some of you may be familiar with. It was the first person that kind of connected us with them, but we're kind of co-partnering with them to lead an engagement process. We're able to compensate attendees, provide food, like do all kind of the best practices of engagement, childcare, all that stuff. So I'm excited about getting that started, and I think it'll be a really good time to kind of bring everything to the PAC, let you know kind of how we've gotten to this point, and then also like we'll start kind of through this engagement process developing what will be in that racial equity framework, and definitely want input from this group on that as well. So thanks for bringing that up, Bria. I'll make sure to get that on the agenda in the coming months.
Awesome, that would be great. Trying to think. Anything else you want to bring up? I know Open Streets has been promoted, and asking for vendors in certain areas. Dan. You're muted.
Thank you. You know, between this and Zoom, the buttons are in different places, and oh well. I'm not sure, Bree, if you had heard about Hiawatha Avenue through our last meeting or through a different source that it's getting a mill and overlay, and it's happening this summer. And I raised this point at the I think the general BAC last time, that this was happening pretty quickly. And Jesse, who is the MnDOT representative on the BAC, went back and tried to dig up where things are at, and actually did a very comprehensive email back to me. And I'm not sure if you were copied on that, Chris. I don't think you were. Anyways, it was a good email, and there are a fair amount of light. I mean, it's basically curb adjustments that are going on, and to the point that I think it would have been interesting if MnDOT would have brought this before the Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the BAC, because they are doing some spot repairs on the Hiawatha Trail. I think that's the best I can say it is. But yeah, I think that to encourage them, just how the county does, comes to us with a number of projects that are going through the city. It'd be interesting for MnDOT to do the same as well. And I haven't responded to him because the email is deep enough where it's taken me several reads to get my head wrapped around it. But I will do that, and I think there are some improvements, and hopefully it will be good. I mean, it won't be what we all want, but there will be some improvements.
Can't go backwards when you put a light rail next to a road. Thanks, NIMBYs.
It's interesting. I don't know if anybody else has had much experience of bicycling on the Hiawatha Trail. I've done it a few times and just don't like it. I mean, it's Minnehaha is just much better and much smoother, and it just doesn't feel like you're riding on an old sidewalk. And I just don't know how, the thing about the Hiawatha, it doesn't get you. I mean, I don't know where it goes. It kind of just runs along the light rail, and is that other people's experiences too, or?
Yeah, I live right off the Hiawatha, and it's just a connector, like to bypass 35 for cars. There's nothing to do with the light rail. The light rail is just like an add-on to connect the airport in Mall of America to downtown.
But do you bike? Do you bike the Hiawatha Trail?
Oh yeah, it's like super fast because it's just the lights. But yeah, it's like ka-gong, ka-gong, ka-gong. So I usually, when I'm heading anywhere in Hiawatha, like when I'm leaving my house, I always take it because it's the fastest. However, I'm going home and I have more time because I'm not running late to get home usually. But I'm always running late to other things. I just take Minnehaha, especially with the trees. I mean, I don't, like the bike lanes are fine, but I really like the trees over the street. That's like my favorite bit.
Right.
And I always wear like all the lights if I ever do go home along Hiawatha, because I don't trust the cars on the little off ramps onto the side streets. Very much. But yeah, it's not awesome. I always feel bad for those tiny trees on Hiawatha. They struggle so much.
I was gonna say the pork chops are not great. Like any crossing along Hiawatha is not great. But aside from that, like, yeah, it doesn't look great, and it's definitely not the greatest surface, but it is a wide separated path that like feels safer biking along Hiawatha than Central. So that says something, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean the light rail, yes, is there. So yeah, I wish it was more pleasant.
Yeah, it makes me think that since Minnehaha was so nicely done and is such a pleasant ride and doesn't have those scary pork chops with the light rail, here's a case where signage would be helpful. Every, a 32nd, 34th, 35th, it would be useful to let people know if you're cruising up or down Hiawatha. Let people know that there's another, separate or demarked bike trail on Minnehaha, just to remind people. So again, sort of one of our signage projects at some point.
It's super weird. So, I use Google Maps for my routes, and it does not use Hiawatha as a bike
Oh, really?
anymore, and it pulls you into Minnehaha
Minnehaha.
all the time, which I thought was really weird, and I just noticed it lately. And so it's even hard, like you can even pull the route to it easily, even on a desktop. So yeah, that was weird to me. So I don't know how that happens.
Oh, well, it's like, what do they know? I mean, they do know that it's recently redone. It is a more pleasant ride, but if you're just zooming along, I use both. So
Yeah, so I find it because when I looked at that, I questioned, well, do they just want to make it disappear and they're going to fill cracks by the intersections, or are they going to fill cracks all along the thing? And if that was the case, there's two questions that I have. One is that they probably don't do this for resurfacings, but it would be interesting to push the question that this was an opportunity to engage with the city and to potentially, and I don't know particularly after what happened at the Midtown Greenway, but St. Anthony Village up here just resurfaced one of the sidewalks, old sidewalks around the Grand Rounds up here. They did it last year or 2 years ago, and they just took a 6-foot sidewalk and they laid a layer of asphalt on top. And if that was at all advisable, would it be all that much more? I mean, it'd be somewhat like the Midtown Greenway. What you're doing is you're laying it over cement, and but that would potentially make that it would read as a trail rather than as a sidewalk that goes to nowhere. And so I thought I would raise a few of those points to Jesse, since a number of people are there and copied on it, and it would be it's just saying, hey.
Yeah, I mean, who did the that little connector, Chris? That is up from 32nd to the
Yeah, I believe that's MnDOT. That was a MnDOT project. Yeah.
It's like just something like that to do along Hiawatha would be really nice, and it has pretty nice lighting too. But yeah, but the crossing at 32nd is right there. Is there's only that one side you could go across. So it's really interesting because they really it sounded like the outreach. I only saw this because it's a Facebook ad that keeps on plugging, like Hiawatha will be closed for months. So it's
Yep.
whatever. And then when they mentioned like Franklin Bridge, and I'm like, there's a bridge over Franklin on Hiawatha? And I'm like, oh, it's that big overpass, which is a bridge, which don't really pay attention, especially for biking, and especially if you're driving. But as a driver as well.
It does feel like a missed opportunity. And Jesse said, the best time to have public engagement about this would have taken place 3 to 4 years ago, which, is not surprising. And but it's just too bad that MnDOT didn't think about bringing that forward, what they were planning to do. And they might have gotten some good thoughts, and we may have gotten some, possibility. I mean, what happened on the Grand Rounds between Broadway and Ridgeway Parkway, which is about 3/4 of a mile, and they were redoing 35, which goes over the top of that, and they came. MnDOT came to the city and said, "Hey, we're redoing this thing. Do you want to should we worry about going underneath this? And MPRB and the city partnered, and they threw a section of trail all the way from Broadway up to Ridgeway Parkway. That was an important thing, and it was an opportunity piece. And here's a chance for something similar. Could have been at least proposed, and so.
Did Jesse say that it's like too late to do anything, or?
I think that's it's far down the line. Yeah, I think that I don't want to speak for him, and I'm probably I don't think I'm saying anything that's out of school or anything, but I think I'll just write him back and say this would be a great thing to bring up at Chris, maybe at our engineering meeting if we're not too terribly busy, and if not, then on the full BAC where maybe we've had more time to think about it.
That /projects/HWY 55 Minneapolis.
So, you know, maybe one thing we could talk about in engineering is the, just the engineering of putting asphalt, how thick, what sort of mix on top of a sidewalk. I don't know that that's a best practice, but depending on thickness and condition of the sidewalk, wow, I mean, Hiawatha, you got the machines out there, although they're probably really wide, right? So you need a special machine, but it makes one think that, wow, this could be a quick win, right? Cheap, easy, little side hustle, while doing Hiawatha.
Yeah, so I mean, Chris, how do we work with MnDOT and Met Council to bring these projects to us more regularly?
Well, so, I mean, I think there's a pretty good standard of MnDOT and Hennepin County and the Park Board bringing their projects through the BAC and PAC. I was actually going to say, I can't remember if it's the same thing or not, but I actually do recall like a couple of years ago, I think they may have brought this project through. And I don't know if it came through the BAC. It was like an ADA update. It was what it was called at the time. And I think it for sure came through the PAC. It may have come through the BAC, but like sometimes when things are at such a level like that, or depending on kind of the mood of the group, you get kind of focused on, oh, okay, you're making updates at these intersections, and like you don't think like, oh, why don't you go do this whole corridor with it? Or maybe you did say it then, and they still chose not to. But so that's the first thing. But in general, we rely on project partners to reach out, and I think there's a pretty good standard of them doing that. In this case, Dan kind of has raised this with Jesse, so I would still rely on, like, Dan, if you want to, kind of like you were interested in asking Jesse if he wanted to come to the engineering. I can't compel any partners to do anything, so I'll trust Jesse's judgment on where it is in the process, and if that makes sense, and if that's something he's willing to do. But that's generally kind of how it works.
Gotcha. Cool. Man, I can't believe it's spring and construction season is happening. Anything else anyone wants to bring up? Cool. Okay, it's 5:11, so let's get out of here, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Good night.
Bye, Melissa.